The junkyard stretched across the edge of the old desert like a scar, metal bones of a world long past poking through the sand. Heat shimmered above scorched fuselages, twisted panels, and long-dead machines. Rust had claimed most of the wrecks, and nature didn't care to reclaim the rest. It was a graveyard for dreams, for inventions that never soared and plans that never mattered. For Rockin, it was home. He moved through the wrecks like a man walking through a cathedral. Every broken antenna, dented chassis, or snapped wire told a story. Someone had once built it with hope. That hope had died, sure, but that didn't make it worthless. Sometimes things could be brought back. Rockin knew something about being discarded. He crouched beside a shattered fuel converter, its core split and smoking faintly from heat retained in the casing. His calloused fingers traced the edges, checking welds, feeling for salvageable circuits. It wasn't much, but with a little work, it could be patched into one of the desert crawlers. Maybe enough to trade for clean water tablets or solar mesh. He heard it then, a sound too soft to belong here. Not the hum of wind, not the sharp scrape of shifting metal. It was a whimper. Rockin froze. At first he thought it might be the wind caught in a narrow passage, but there it was again. A small, frightened sound, high-pitched, alive. He moved cautiously, stepping over a collapsed cart and ducking beneath the remains of a mining drone. The sound led him to a narrow gap between two fractured hulls, ancient shuttles once used for interplanetary trade, now housing little more than birds and dust. He almost didn't see her at first. Nestled between the curve of an engine casing and the shadow of a broken wing, a figure huddled in the sand. Not human, not entirely. Her skin shimmered faintly with iridescent hues, the kind he'd only seen once before, long ago, during the Xyrath landing. Her limbs were folded tightly, knees to chest, fingers wrapped around herself as if trying to disappear into the heat. Long, white-blue hair clung to her face, filthy and tangled. Her eyes, enormous and deep violet, locked onto him the instant he stepped into view. She hissed, not in hatred, in fear. He held his hands up slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't speak. She didn't lower her guard either. "I live here," he said carefully. "And you clearly don't. I'm guessing you crashed. You're hurt." Still nothing. Rockin took a step closer. She bared her teeth. Not sharp, but foreign. Fangs meant for defense, not predation. Her whole frame trembled. She was terrified. Then he noticed something beneath her cloak. A lump. No, too small. Breathing. Children. His heart stopped. She was shielding them. From him. "You're a mother," he murmured, more to himself than her. One of the children stirred. A small face peeked out, wide eyes like stars, glimmering with faint phosphorescence. Half her size, maybe 5 years old. Too thin, probably dehydrated. The other, slightly older, remained motionless, tucked against her side. Rockin knelt. "I have water. Clean. Food, too. I won't ask anything from you. Not a name. Not where you're from. Just let me help." Silence. Then she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Soft, strange, musical. "Why?" He blinked. "Why help you?" She nodded. "Because everyone else would run. Because aliens weren't welcome anymore. Not after the war. Not after the treaties collapsed and the coalition splintered. Not after Earth shut itself off and built walls high enough to forget the stars." But he couldn't say all that. So he told the truth. "Because someone helped me once." She stared at him, those eyes still cautious, but no longer afraid. When he extended the canteen, she didn't reach for it, her child did. The little one scrambled forward, grasping the metal cylinder with shaking fingers and drinking like it was the last water in the galaxy. Rockin didn't stop her. After a long pause, the woman spoke again, this time with more strength. "My name is Chen." He repeated it carefully. "Chen." She nodded. Rockin gestured toward the shelter he'd pieced together from shuttle wings and cargo struts. "It's not much, but it's cooler than out here. And safer." Her eyes moved from him to her children, then back again. She rose slowly, and followed, Inside, the shelter wasn't fancy, just insulation panels, thermal sheets, and an old fusion heater set into a sand-carved hollow. But it was enough. He laid out rations, protein paste packets and dried fruit. The children devoured them in silence. Chen barely touched hers. "What happened?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then answered. "Our craft was attacked. Not by humans. By others." He didn't press. "Not yet." She stared at the flickering heater, her voice distant. "We were fleeing. My kind are no longer welcome anywhere. Not after the armistice fractured. Too many saw us as sympathizers." "And your mate?" he asked. She shook her head. "Killed before we escaped orbit." Rockin felt a weight settle in his chest. He watched her wrap a blanket around her children, one girl, one boy. Their names, she later said, were Neri and Solon. Half-bloods. Children of mixed heritage. Probably the reason they were targeted. That night, long after they'd fallen asleep, Rockin sat outside and watched the desert sky. Stars blinked above him. Silent. Indifferent. But he'd made a choice. They would not be alone. Not anymore. Days passed. Chen barely spoke. But she accepted water, food, even helped clean the filters from his recycler unit. Her knowledge of tech was surprising, delicate fingers dancing across circuits like a symphony. She didn't talk about her people again, nor did he ask. The children warmed up faster. Neri followed him constantly, asking questions in broken Terran. Solon was more withdrawn but observant, studying everything, often silently mimicking his gestures. Rockin didn't push. He just made space. That was all. Until the night he found Chen outside the shelter, staring at the stars with her hands wrapped around herself. "They won't stop looking," she said suddenly. "Who?" "The Zurith. The ones who attacked us. They were tracking hybrids. My children are rare. Valuable even." "Valuable?" She looked at him, expression hollow. "To the wrong kind of people." Rockin's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. She continued, voice low. "They'll never stop. They think the war isn't over. They want a second chance." He stepped closer. "Then they'll have to go through me." She blinked at him. "You'd fight them?" He nodded. "You're just a man in a junkyard." He smiled. "Exactly the kind they underestimate." Weeks passed. The rhythm of survival turned into something gentler. Chen smiled more. Neri laughed. Solon spoke his first full sentence in Terran. Rockin repaired a broken crawler engine with Chen's help, her insight guiding his hands as if she'd been born understanding circuitry. She even teased him once. "You solder like a blind vole." He chuckled. "You kiss like one?" She flushed, and that moment hung between them like static. Not acted on, but present. He woke one night to shouting. Ran outside barefoot. Chen stood in the sand, holding Neri, panicked. "Solon is missing." They searched the ruins, calling his name. Then Rockin spotted a faint glow between two wrecks. He ran. Found Solon crouched beside a wrecked communications dish, hands glowing faintly as he touched the rusted components. Energy pulsed beneath his skin. Chen gasped. "No, it's starting." Rockin helped the boy up. "What is?" "He's awakening. His bloodline. Too early." The air felt heavier. Magic? No, something more advanced. Biological tech, alien and ancient. He remembered stories of Zyrith children bonded to star cores, able to manipulate energy fields. "Will he be okay?" Chen nodded slowly. "Yes, but now." The signal might have reached them. Rockin didn't sleep that night. He worked, rewired old satellites, set up perimeter sensors, reinforced the shelter. When Chen came to him at dawn, he was still working. "You don't owe us this," she said. He met her gaze. "Maybe not, but I want to." Her voice trembled. "Why?" "Because I don't want to be alone anymore. And maybe you don't either." She stepped closer. "Rockin." He held her hand. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. The days after the awakening passed like breath on glass. Fragile, each moment delicate and unclear. Chen watched Solon constantly now. She checked his temperature, monitored the faint pulses of bioluminescence crawling under his skin, whispered things in a tongue Rockin didn't know. The boy didn't seem in pain, but he slept longer than before, and when awake, often stared at nothing as if listening to voices far beyond human ears. Rockin had reinforced the shelter, but paranoia crept in. He scanned the sky at night, fingers hovering over the old comm array he'd barely coaxed into a crude radar net. Nothing pinged, nothing stirred, but they both felt it. Something was coming. Chen said it like a truth she didn't want to believe. They won't stop until they have him. Then they're going to be disappointed, Rockin replied, trying to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He found her sitting alone one evening, brushing her daughter's hair with gentle fingers. Neri slept against her shoulder, curled in the safety only a mother could provide. Her gaze met his as he approached, and she gave the faintest nod. "You've built a fortress out of trash," she murmured. He sat beside her. "I prefer the term modular defensive compound. Has a nice ring, don't you think?" That coaxed a laugh from her. Soft, melodic, real. Then it faded. "I never thought I'd see kindness again," she whispered. "Not like this. Not from your kind." He looked at her, studying the faint shimmer of her skin in the firelight. "We're not all monsters. Neither are mine," she said, quiet and aching. "But war, it reshapes how we see each other, turns neighbors into ghosts, turns protectors into shadows. You still carry that?" "I carry everything," she replied. "A mother doesn't get to forget." They sat in silence. Eventually, he spoke. "You could leave. Try to find others." "Where?" He didn't have an answer. "Here I feel safe," she said. "Not because of the walls. Because of you." He swallowed. "Then stay." Her eyes shone. "Even if it brings danger? I'd rather face danger with you than peace without." Her hand found his in the dark. She didn't speak again, and neither did he. But they didn't let go. The following morning, the radar array finally chirped. Faint, a distortion on the edge of the scan field. Not natural, not weather, not random. Rockin ran diagnostics 3 times, hoping it was a glitch. It wasn't. The signal repeated twice, then vanished. But its shape matched an old Xyrath signature he'd seen in his time working with off-world tech. Civilian class, disguised emissions, but the frequency shift was military. When he showed Chen, she turned cold. "They've found us." He gritted his teeth. "We're not defenseless. They won't come peacefully. Neither will I." She hesitated. "You could still walk away. Say you found us. They'd believe you. Would you?" She didn't answer. "I'm not leaving." That night, he armed the perimeter. He buried energy traps, adjusted proximity flares, charged the few defense drones he'd salvaged. He couldn't match them ship for ship, but he didn't need to. He knew this land, this junk. It was his, and no one fought harder than someone who'd already lost everything once. Neri stayed close to her mother, silent and wide-eyed. Solon seemed dazed most of the time, his eyes flickering with unreadable patterns. Once, Rockin caught him staring at the stars, whispering a name Rockin didn't recognize. "Vealora," he told Chen. She looked shaken. "That's the name of the old world core, the source of our people's ancestral code." He's hearing echoes. Is it dangerous? It's awakening something deeper than memory, something woven into his blood. Is that what they're after? She nodded. They'll take him, dissect him, twist his gifts into weapons, or trade him to others who will. He looked at the boy, curled beneath thermal sheets. They're not getting him. The storm came on the 3rd night. Not wind, not rain. Lights in the sky, sharp, silver blue. Silent descent. A craft, masked in sleek angles and adaptive armor, lowered above the dunes like a predator. It was small scout class, but the threat wasn't size. It was the purpose. Chen stiffened. They're here. Rockin handed her a blaster. Not military grade, but enough. Keep the kids hidden. She didn't argue. Rockin moved through the maze of wrecks, activating his defenses as he went. Sparks lit up as drones powered on, their red lenses flaring. Energy traps began to hum beneath the sand. The craft didn't land. It hovered. From beneath its belly, 3 figures dropped. Tall, armored, non-human. Zurith. Rockin had seen vids, but in real life they were even more monstrous. Elongated skulls, 6-fingered hands, armor that shimmered with light-consuming fields. Their weapons pulsed with quiet menace. The lead one stepped forward. "We seek the child," it announced. Rockin didn't move. "You're trespassing. Return the offspring, and we will spare you. I'm not much for negotiation. Then die with them." The Zurith raised its weapon. Rockin triggered the first trap. An explosion rocked the sand, sending 2 of the soldiers flying backward. The third fired blindly, but Rockin had already moved, weaving between metal corpses of ancient machines, drawing them into the maze. His drones sprang to life, pelting the intruders with ion charges. Not enough to kill, enough to disorient. Rockin rolled beneath a ruptured fuel line, firing from cover. One of the attackers shrieked as his armor short-circuited. Chen appeared then, not hiding, furious. Her body shimmered as bioluminescent threads wove through her skin. She raised both hands and unleashed a pulse of kinetic force that sent the last attacker crashing into a rusted hauler. It wasn't just magic. It was science wrapped in myth. The Zurith scattered. Rockin reloaded. "You okay?" he called to her. She didn't answer. Her eyes glowed. Another attacker rose behind him. A blast struck Rockin in the side, sending him crashing into metal. Pain lanced through his ribs. He barely raised his weapon. Before he could fire, the soldier staggered. Solon stood behind him, glowing like a sunrise. His hand was raised. The Zurith convulsed, then dropped. The boy collapsed. Rockin caught him. The air turned still. The invaders were down. For now. But they would return. They buried the bodies deep in the dunes. Salvaged what they could. Rebuilt what they must. Rockin was injured. Ribs fractured, arm burned, but refused to rest. Chen cleaned his wounds with steady hands. "You nearly died," she murmured. He smiled weakly. "You've seen my cooking. I've faced worse." Chen didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't afraid. It was real. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead to his. "You fight like one of my people," she said. "And you love like one of mine." Her voice shook. "I didn't know I could feel this again." "Neither did I." Outside, the wind shifted. A new future was taking shape, rough, uncertain, but real. And somewhere in the wreckage of forgotten dreams, they had found something worth building again. Together. The days blurred together in the aftermath of the attack. Every moment was a balance of repair, vigilance, and survival. The wreckage of the Zurith soldiers was still strewn about the junkyard, a constant reminder that they were not alone, that the eyes of the universe were turning toward them. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, a new rhythm had settled into their lives. Solon was awake more often now, his strange, glowing energy a constant source of both comfort and concern. Chen had no doubt that whatever abilities lay dormant inside him were growing, awakening in ways they hadn't anticipated. Scared her, but she didn't show it. Not in front of Rockin. The human was an enigma. He wasn't like the others. He had faced danger without hesitation, without fear. And every time the Zurith attacked, he fought with a fierceness that almost matched her own. Yet there was something else in his eyes, something softer. A gentleness that had begun to seep into the spaces between their shared glances. The bond between them, already fragile, had been forged in the fires of survival. But now, in the quiet moments, it was growing into something deeper. Rockin had a way of looking at her, as if she were the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. He had never made her feel like a threat or something to be feared. Instead, he treated her as though she were human, perhaps more so than the others of her kind ever had. One afternoon, when the heat of the sun was unbearable, Chen found herself alone with Solon in the makeshift shelter they had built from scraps of metal and old tech. Rocken had gone off to scout the perimeter, checking for signs of other intruders. His presence was a constant comfort, but it was also a weight. The danger that loomed outside their small haven was never far from her mind. Solon had been quiet all day, his body still and unmoving as he sat near the window, staring out at the vast expanse of desolate land that stretched beyond the junkyard. Chen could feel his energy fluctuating, pulsing in ways that were difficult to understand. She had tried to communicate with him, but his mind seemed lost in some distant place. It was as though the boy was searching for something he couldn't find, something inside him that he didn't yet comprehend. She sat beside him, watching the faint glow of his skin flicker like a dying star. His fingers twitched, as if responding to some unseen signal. "Solon?" she called softly, her voice gentle. His head turned slowly toward her. His eyes were wide, unfocused. "Where are you?" she asked, her hand resting lightly on his. "What are you feeling?" He stared at her for a long moment, his gaze distant and disconnected. Then, almost as if waking from a dream, he blinked. "Where is Rocken?" His voice was soft, uncertain. "He's out there," she said, gesturing to the door. "He's always watching." Solon's eyes flickered to the door, then back to her. "I feel something calling me," he said quietly. "It's distant, but it's real." Chen's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly what he meant. "Your people?" she murmured, though the words tasted bitter in her mouth. "They are out there, looking for you." Solon nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I don't want them to find me," he whispered, "but I don't know how to stop them." Chen took his hand, squeezing it gently. "We will stop them, together." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the junkyard, Rocken returned. His expression was grim. "They're close," he said simply, his voice tinged with urgency. "I picked up their signals, too close. They're moving fast." Chen's heart raced. The time had come. "We have to move," she said, standing up quickly. "We can't afford to wait any longer." Rocken nodded, his jaw clenched. "I've got the drones on standby. I've rigged up the traps again. But we need to get out of here. Now." Chen turned to Solon, her heart aching. "Can you come with us? We can't keep running forever." Solon's eyes met hers, the faint glow in his pupils flickering with an intensity she had never seen before. "I have to go," he said, his voice firm. "They'll never stop coming until they have me. But I won't let them take me." Chen felt a cold chill run down her spine. There was something in Solon's voice now that she hadn't heard before, something that echoed with the power of his people. His resolve was unwavering, and in that moment, she realized that she was no longer protecting him. He was protecting them. "We will fight, then," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her chest. "We will fight and we will win." The next few hours were a blur of motion and chaos. Rocken led the way, moving swiftly through the junkyard, his knowledge of the terrain giving them an advantage. Chen followed closely behind, her senses sharp, her instincts on high alert. Solon was at her side, his energy more concentrated now, his movements fluid as he helped fortify the defenses they had set up. They worked as a unit, synchronized in a way that felt almost natural. But the constant hum of tension never left them. They knew it was only a matter of time before the Zurith arrived. And then, just as they were finishing their preparations, the ground shook, the sky above them darkened, and the unmistakable sound of heavy machinery pierced the silence. Chen's heart sank. "They're here." Rocken's hand tightened around his weapon. "Stay close. Don't let them take Solon." They gathered near the central shelter, waiting for the inevitable clash. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence stretched taut with the weight of what was about to come. Chen's mind raced. She had no idea what the Zurith would do once they found Solon, but she knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't stop until they had him, and that was something she could never allow. Solon stood beside her, his eyes glowing brighter now, his energy pulsing with increasing intensity. He was no longer the frightened child they had rescued from the wreckage. He had become something more, something powerful. "I'll protect you," he whispered to her, his voice full of certainty. Chen smiled faintly, though her heart was heavy. "I know you will." The first explosion sent them into action. The explosion tore through the night, a blinding flash of light that sent the ground trembling beneath their feet. The sound echoed through the junkyard like a thunderclap, deafening and relentless. Chen instinctively reached for Solon, pulling him closer as she scanned the horizon. The Zurith had arrived. The first wave of enemy soldiers charged forward, their heavy boots pounding the earth, their weapons raised. They were a force to be reckoned with, armored and relentless, driven by a single goal, to capture Solon. Chen's heart pounded in her chest as she reached for her own weapons, her fingers steady despite the rush of adrenaline that surged through her veins. "We hold them here," she commanded, her voice unwavering. "Do not let them through." Rockin nodded, his face grim but determined. He had set up the defenses, and now it was time to see if they would hold. The drones hummed to life above them, darting through the air with precision, their weapons aimed and ready. Chen could feel the tension in the air, the energy crackling like an electric storm. As the Zurith neared, Chen's pulse quickened. They were coming in waves, each group advancing faster than the last. The drones opened fire first, their laser blasts cutting through the darkness, striking the Zurith with pinpoint accuracy. But it wasn't enough. The enemy was relentless, and they kept coming, their numbers growing. Rockin fired his rifle, the recoil heavy in his arms, and the sound of his shots joined the chaos around them. Chen focused on the nearest group of Zurith soldiers, her movements fluid and precise as she fired her weapons, taking down one after another. The alien soldiers fell with a sickening thud, their bodies crumpling to the ground, but there were always more to fight. Chen felt a surge of heat as she swung her blade, cleaving through one of the Zurith soldiers' armor with a clean stroke. But it was only a moment's relief. She didn't have time to savor the kill. There were more to fight, more to protect. And then, in the middle of the chaos, she saw him. Solon stood at the center of it all, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. The energy radiating from him was like a beacon, a shining light in the midst of the darkness. His hands were outstretched, and the ground beneath the Zurith began to tremble, shifting as if answering to his will. Chen's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just survival anymore. Solon was tapping into something far greater than they had realized. She had known there was power within him, but this was something else entirely. He was no longer just a child they had rescued. He was a force to be reckoned with. The Zurith hesitated, their movements faltering as they took in the sight of the young alien. They had never encountered anything like this before, and in that moment of hesitation, Chen saw her opportunity. "Rockin'!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "We need to move. Now!" Rockin glanced at her, his eyes wide with realization. "He's doing it," he muttered. "He's turning the tide." Chen nodded. "We can't wait for it to be too late." They broke formation, moving quickly toward Solon. His energy was surging, pushing the Zurith back with a force that was almost unnatural. The ground around them cracked, splitting open as if it couldn't contain the power that flowed from him. The Zurith soldiers began to retreat, their ranks scattering as their confidence faltered. But Chen knew they wouldn't be gone for long. They would regroup and they would return. The Zurith never gave up. "Solon," she called, reaching out for him. "You need to stop. They'll be back. We have to leave now." Solon turned to her, his eyes bright, his face filled with an emotion she couldn't place. Was it fear? Hope? Desperation? Perhaps it was all of them, tangled together in the raw energy that emanated from him. "They're not afraid anymore," he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "They know I'm not what they thought I was." Chen's heart clenched. He was right. The Zurith had come for him, to take him, to use him. But they were learning that he was not just a weapon. He was something far more dangerous. "We need to leave, Solon," she repeated, more urgently this time. "We need to leave before they come back with more." He hesitated, his gaze drifting back toward the broken ground and the retreating Zurith. Then, as though snapping out of a trance, he nodded. "Let's go," he said quietly, the words almost lost in the wind. Together, the three of them moved quickly, Rockin taking the lead, guiding them through the wreckage of the junkyard. Solon's energy still pulsed around them, but now it was more controlled, focused. He was no longer lost in the power he had tapped into. He was with them. As they made their way to the edge of the junkyard, Chen glanced back once more, the flicker of the Zurith soldiers' retreating forms barely visible in the distance. They would regroup, she knew. They would return stronger and angrier. But they had time. They had a chance to regroup, to plan, and to fight again. And this time they would be ready. Rockin turned to her, his face set with determination. "We'll keep moving. We'll find a place to regroup. Somewhere safe." Chen nodded, her gaze meeting his. There was something in the way he looked at her, something in the way he stood beside her that made her believe it. Made her believe in them, in this strange little family they had become. "We'll be ready," she said quietly, her voice filled with resolve. And with that, they moved forward into the uncertain night, knowing that the fight wasn't over yet. But for the first time in a long while, Chen felt the weight of the future lift just a little. There was a spark of hope between them, fragile but real. And that, she thought, was all they needed.